Hello and welcome to the Sportlink podcast. I'm Mark Armstrong, and this week myself and John Downes are joined by the British woman that holds the second fastest ever marathon time in Mara Yamauchi. Mara is a two-time Olympic marathon runner, a former national cross-country champion and a Commonwealth Games medalist. She really does have a fascinating story to tell, combining her studies at Oxford University before becoming a British diplomat with an athletics career that would take her all the way to 2 Olympic Games. I'm not sure he'd have much of a career as a diplomat, but John will, of course, be here for his training tip of the week. Whilst in hijinks with John, he recounts a story about when sex isn't sex. So, John, how are you, mate? All right?
I'm fine, mate. I'm trying to not laugh because you've introduced that last piece. When people hear it, they'll understand. But, yeah, I'm pretty good. Thanks for asking.
Good stuff. Just tell us a little bit about this week's guest in Mara.
Oh, gosh, where to start? I mean, I remember when she kind of came to Bob Parker's group and she started off running with Parkside Harriers and so on. And she went on to win the national cross country in 1998. Since then, I mean, she's probably one of the most celebrated, tenacious, hard-working, down-to-earth, honest athletes you could meet in the marathon. I mean, she ran 2:23, which is just phenomenal running. She finished second in London in 2009 with that. So, look, I'm looking forward to interviewing her. I'm looking forward to finding out a few things about Japan because I'm interested in a lot of Japanese culture and so on. So it'll be a really good to do so.
Mara, welcome to the Sportlink podcast. How are you today? All right?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Mara, thanks for coming on. I just wanted to ask you, first of all, I read up a little bit about you, obviously, but how did you first get into running?
So when I was at school, I did a whole variety of sports. I did hockey, netball, swimming, tennis, rounders, and a little bit of athletics, but nothing too major. I did run for my local road running club, which was Headington Road Runners in Oxford, but that was nothing too serious. I ran with them probably 2 to 3 times a week, and some of that was interval speed training. And I also ran for about a year for Radley Ladies Athletics Club. But athletics was never a really big deal for me as growing up. And then when I went to university, that's really when I specialised in distance running. I joined the cross-country club and I was training every day. I really focused from that point on running, and I did much less of the other sports that I had done while I was growing up.
So, Mara, you've gone to university, you've started running more and stuff like that. What was the first bit of success you had that you could kind of see, I'm actually improving and I've moved on to a little bit of a different level?
Yeah, so I guess at the end of the first term that I was at university, I made it onto the university cross-country team for the Oxford v Cambridge varsity match, which was a big deal for us. I mean, obviously there are universities which are stronger, and Loughborough, Birmingham, I'm sure they show Oxford and Cambridge a clean set of heels over and over. But at the time, that was a big deal for me to make it onto the team. So I was improving fast, which was not a surprise because that was really the first time that I'd done structured, organised, consistent training. And throughout that 3 years that I was studying, cross-country really was my thing. I wasn't very good on the track. I did do track in the summer, but I've always sort of lacked natural speed really for the track. I have better endurance and strength. So cross-country was really my thing and I really loved it. I did the student championships, the Mike Sully race in Bristol. I think we did the nationals, certainly the student competition. So yeah, that's really when I really got into it and I improved over that 3 years. And then I did a year of postgraduate studies in London, and at that point I was training with Bob Parker, the late Bob Parker, at Parkside AC. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually that transition to joining Bob's group, I really have to thank Julian Gota for that, because he was coaching the Oxford University team on and off, and he really encouraged me to go and join Bob's group. I didn't know anything about Bob's group, but he really encouraged me, and
Yeah.
you know, that sort of intervention from Julian really changed my life, because you know, I loved training with Parkside. Bob was a fantastic coach. I improved a lot there. I was rubbing shoulders with, you know, legends like Alison Wyeth and Andrea Whitcomb, all those people. Yeah. So it's now I look back, I think, gosh, how grateful I am to Julian for that just brief conversation, you know, at a really important time in my life when I was trying to decide where I was going to live and what I was going to do.
What were the differences between training at university then you went on obviously to train with Bob? What were the differences there? Was it a lot more intense, a lot more serious, or were you just running with better runners and that obviously brought you on?
It was quite similar in terms of content, but I think we did one more speed session per week. So when I was at university, typically we did hills on Mondays, an easy run Tuesday, 3-minute efforts on Wednesdays, a kind of fast tempo, not quite tempo, but not a hanging around run on Thursday. I think Friday we had an easy day or off. Saturday we'd race, Sunday long run. With Bob, we did hills on a Monday, track on Tuesday. So 2 consecutive days of hard training. Then I could barely move on Wednesday. That was an easy day. Then Thursday we did long road reps. So a mile and a half, 2 miles. John's nodding. It all sounds very familiar.
Yeah, I lived only 400 meters away from that loop.
Yeah. I'm sure it's got very fond memories for you.
And painful one.
I don't know why I'm telling you all this stuff. You know.
No, but it's great for other people to learn, because, like, I mean, it was just this little hidden gym, and it was all this. He just used the roads around Rayner's Lane and East Court and so on like that, and it was and Penner. It was perfect. Kept it simple.
So we did that road session on Thursdays. As I said, that could be a mile and a half, 2 miles. And then on Saturdays, we would do intervals on a field, which I think belonged to Harrow School. So that was kind of cross-country type reps. And then on a Sunday, we would do long runs. So we were basically doing 4 speed sessions a week with Bob. But as you said, John, you know, it was a little gem of a group. And what I really loved about that group was Bob was so even-handed with everybody. You know, if you were the top kid in the group, you were treated the same as everybody else. He was so welcoming. You know, when I went there, I was towards the back of the group. I was, you know, and I never really got to the front of the group, to be honest. You know, and I was always trying to close the gap on people like Andrea Whitcomb. Sally Ann Cox was another one at the time. And that was kind of towards the end of the era where Parkside were undefeatable at the English National. They won it, I think, 6 or 7 years in a row. And that was a reflection of the depth in that group. It wasn't just 1 or 2 stars that Bob had. You know, he had so much depth there. People like myself, I was a bit low down in the pecking order. You know, but so that was. And another thing I really loved about that group was it just was not complicated. Bob didn't do science. It was just consistent, hard training. When I say he didn't do science, he didn't sort of read scientific papers and make it all complicated. But actually, if you look at training from a kind of scientific perspective, in my experience, you kind of arrive at the same type of training that Bob was doing. So actually the training he was doing was very effective, although he came at it from a kind of let's just do the hard work consistently approach rather than a scientific approach. And he was always there for us. And it was very straightforward. It was just hill repetitions Monday, Tuesdays. We nearly always did the same reps within a track session. So it would be 16 400s or 8 8s. He didn't really mix it up or complicate things. It was just simple hard work, and we all helped each other. So yeah, that time was really, really special.
Yeah, I mean, he was a very uncomplicated bloke.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have somebody ringing me there. He was a very, very uncomplicated bloke, and that he even when he was talking to you about races and the competition, and he'd be on about your competition, and thinking me, Bob, what's his name? You know, that person got black hair. You know, she runs from that side over. And I used to love that about his innocence about him. But when he came to talking to people, he was actually very calming. Yeah. And you say he wasn't scientific, but what he had was he had a pretty good eye, and he'd say, right, we just need to back off. We're going to do a little bit less. So he added and subtracted Mara, which I thought was very, very good. And that was a great group that was there. I mean, I remember most of even the guys that were there, Gary Lavers and people like Kevin Jacks and so on. And it was always fun. I mean, it was always fun. Yeah, yeah. When I say Bob wasn't scientific, I don't mean for a moment that he didn't know what he was doing. He was a fantastic coach. He understood. He understood training and its effects. He was brilliant with racing. He was very good dealing with people, communicating, motivating people. He was very straightforward, and he produced a lot of champions. Yeah, I mean, so you've come to the group. You've started at the back. You've come and moving up to the middle of the pack, and then around 1998, you win the English National Cross Country Championships. I think something that must have been always in the back of your mind, that you'd be like dreaming and hoping one day that you could do this and emulate Andrea and Alison and so on. And then you do it. What was that like? There must have been some special day. Yeah, it was just incredible. I mean, the National is such an iconic event. And until that time, I think 11th was the best that I'd ever finished. And until that point, the National, or even like the student championships, any high-level cross-country event, for me, was just all about sort of how near the front you could be. It was never about winning. It was, if a teammate finished, let's say, 20th, we would all be going, wow, that's amazing. Because that's what cross-country is like. There's so much depth. A few seconds can separate 20 people. And when it's a high level, there's a lot of depth. It's so flipping difficult to win these races. Even if you're the best athlete there on the day, you still have to run a tactically good race. You have to know the course a bit. It's to actually win a cross-country race, I think is just so much harder than winning a race with much fewer athletes in. I'm not for a moment saying winning track is easy, but with cross-country, you've got several hundred athletes on the start line at least. So it was really, really special. I mean, I didn't make it onto the World Cross team that year, and the members of the World Cross team, I think all of them were absent from the National. So when I went into the National, I was a bit fed up that I hadn't made the World Cross team, and I was kind of thinking, oh, is this as competitive as it should be? But then on the day, you still have to beat who's there. And I ran in the closing stages. I ran good tactics. Basically, we went down into this big dip in Roundhay Park in Leeds, and then up the other side, and then there was a long flat run into the finish. And I just thought, right, going down into this dip, I'm going to put my foot down, try and get a gap, because you can really accelerate downhill, obviously. And then I'm going to just try and keep the gap going uphill, and then keep it on the flat to the finish. And that's exactly what happened. And I won it, and my dad was there. So it was really, really special. Yeah. I only won it once. I mean, we've got lots of people like Liz Yelling, Hayley Yelling, many-time winners of the National. I'm not one of them, but even to win it once was very special.
Did you realise at the time what a big deal that was, Mara? Did you?
Not really, to be honest. I mean, I was just there to do my best. When I think at every race when I was younger, I would just turn up and be totally focused on doing my best on that day. And I think I've appreciated more since the sort of prestige of the National. And I've been looking back at this website, which has a lot of detail on the history of the National, lots of old photos. It's absolutely fascinating. And to think that I won it once is really special. Yeah, I mean, it's such an iconic race, and yeah, I absolutely love cross country, and to have won it just once is very special.
Well, I mean, I was delighted you won it, because obviously, you're training with Bob's group and all that and so on. But you're saying how you started out with Headley and Radley ladies and so on, and you went to university. But looking at from where you were born, and you were born, I think, in Kenya, and you're named after the River Mara, which is
That's right.
The River Mara, and you ended up then going to Japan. So
Yeah.
you were born in a country where there's iconic runners, and Kip Keino and all those came from, and you've now gone to another country, another land of running, as we can call it.
Yeah.
So I think in a way it was your destiny always to run, Mara, to be quite honest. It was kind of there for you. The stars were aligned for that to happen. So you win in 98. You had I think then as a delegate to the Japanese embassy in Japan. Did you ever think you were going to continue with running, or did you think after 98, well, I've won the national now, will I be able to run, won't I be able to run? Did that cross your mind, or was it quite easy to run when you got there?
Yeah, so when I left full-time education, I wanted to be a top athlete. I wanted to be a top athlete from when I was 11 years old and watched the Los Angeles Olympics on TV. But when I left full-time education, I wasn't at a level where I could earn money from running. And so, when you're 20 years old, say, I just didn't know how I could do it, how I could, was I going to live with my parents, or how was I going to earn a living? And I think my parents kind of encouraged me to get a job. I didn't really have a choice. I had to get a job. And I, as you said, I grew up in Kenya. I traveled a lot when I was a child. So I wanted to do kind of international type work. And I ended up applying to the civil service, and I joined the Foreign Office in the diplomatic service. So all that was great. I got a good job. It was interesting. It was what I wanted to do, but I really wanted to continue running. So it was a bit of a dilemma, to be honest. Right. I mean, had I been living in a country like Japan or even the US, where they have these very established running groups, where you get given a salary, you get all the support you need to train full time, I might have done that. But in the UK, those things don't exist. So young adults who love running have to sort of figure out a way to earn a living and run. So that's what I did. But I never kind of gave up on running. So I tried to continue, and that was with mixed success. So when I was working in very demanding day jobs full time, my training was a bit hit and miss. It wasn't very consistent. I was just too tired, sort of physically and mentally, to train really hard. But then in 1998, I was put on full-time Japanese language training. And that's the year when I sort of started training again seriously with Bob's group and won the national. And then I went to Japan, and again, that was a bit mixed. So I joined a club there called Namban Bengo. And yeah, I managed to do some level of training, but a lot of it was alone. I was having to balance that with first language training and then working in the embassy. So it was quite hit and miss. And I never really, I think I did a 10K in 37 minutes and I did a 5K in about 17:50 odd. So I was kind of in okay shape, but I was never really training consistently and never really improving.
Can you just tell us a little bit about running in Japan, Mara? Because some people might not know just how big it is over there. I mean, it's a bit of a national obsession, isn't it? It's fair to say.
Yes, it's massively popular, especially the marathon. I would say the marathon more than the shorter events. Ekiden road relays are also massively popular at all levels, so school, university, recreational, adults, elite adults. And the kind of pinnacle of that is the Hakone Ekiden, which is for male students. They run from central Tokyo to Mount Fuji on the first day and then return on the second day. So it's really, really popular. But also Japan has this system of corporate teams. So teams, you know, the top Japanese athletes, they're running for companies like Toyota or Daiichi Seimei, which is an insurance company. So all of these athletes, they're employed by the company to train full time, essentially. Some of them work part time, but they're trained to be, they're employed to be athletes. And I don't know the numbers, but I would say there are many hundred, possibly a few thousand doing this. So they have incredible depth and they're completely supported to be world-class athletes. So yeah, and Japan obviously has a rich history in marathon running. So multiple medalists at the Olympics, World Championships. I mean, they've done incredibly well also at cross country, especially in recent years, the junior women winning team medals. I mean, now they've slightly been eclipsed by the East African dominance because, you know, kind of almost nobody can compete with Kenya, Ethiopia, Eritrea now. But, you know, Japan is still winning like team medals in cross country, team medals in the world half. So they have a rich history of top athletes who are role models, you know, who youngsters can aspire to be like. And the depth at elite level in the marathon is absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, in a recent marathon, I think there were 40 men under 210.
Yeah.
40 Japanese men under 210.
Yeah.
I mean,
was that Beppo? I think it was Beppo, was it?
Yes, I think so. That was slightly skewed by the carbon shoes now, but if you say, okay, carbon shoes give men maybe 1 to 2 minutes, that's still 40 men under, let's say, 212 or 211.30. You know, it's absolutely mind-boggling, the depth. So yeah, it's really popular, really well supported by sponsors, by TV, by the general public. So I think countries like ourselves, you know, we could learn a huge amount from how they do it in Japan. I mean, some people say the system there is too hard and you have a lot of attrition.
Yeah.
But and there's some truth in that. But as a nation, if you want to produce world-class athletes who are going to win global medals, as a nation, it's a fantastic strategy.
Mm.
Yeah, because you've got loads of depth. And I think the popularity of the Ekiden relays has contributed to the depth in the marathon, because any university team, corporate team has to produce, let's say, 6, 8, 10 good runners for their Ekiden team. You know, it's not just 2 or 3. So that means you have massive depth.
It's a running scene I've been following for the last probably 18, 19 years, to be quite honest with you. And the depth of races that's on, like Marugame, you know, Beppu, you got Osaka, all these different races that go on, Tokyo. There's loads of others, you know, that you just look, and it's the Ekidens that kind of educate the people that are looking at it. So they understand if you ran a leg from, let's say, from Tokyo heading towards Mount Fuji, they'd understand that system. The one thing I like about it, and there is a high attrition rate, there is that, but it doesn't seem to be phased out by other sports in Japan. They all seem to get equal footing, even though running is probably far more popular. It's on television, I think, 3 or 4 days of the week, events from all over the globe. Whatever's running-wise, it's shown. But I do believe that because the general public know it and understand it, and they're saturated with it, they have a better appreciation. And I agree with you. I think the same thing could be done in the UK. It's about re-educating people that this is what 2 miles is, this is what 4 miles is, because everybody now drives it or gets a bus or gets public transport. Very few people walk or cycle it or run it anymore at a young age, so they understand it. It's about re-education, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, the Ekiden is done at all levels. So, you know, school kids will do an Ekiden. They know what it is, they do it, they practice it, some of them will be good at it. So they know what it is from a young age. And also there's one event where, I think this is right, the different prefectures compete, and on a prefectural team, you have school kids, university kids, adults, it's a mixture. So let's say I'm a 13-year-old keen runner, and I represent my prefecture along with Naoko Takahashi or, you know, Noguchi Mizuki on the same team. You know, how amazing is that?
Well, it's just like you go in a bus with somebody and you have a 13-year-old, and all of a sudden you're looking up at a Julian Goat or a Steve Jones, and they're talking to you. It's just a fantastic atmosphere to be able to compete with them on a team. Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, the first race I did when I moved to Japan as an athlete was the Marugame half marathon. In that was 2006. I finished third, and Noguchi was second. She was the then reigning marathon Olympic champion. So I was sitting next to her at the presentation, and you know, I could have a chat with her. I could see what she was like. So that was a huge boost for me, because I could see that she was just a normal person. So, but then, you know, if you're on the same team with somebody like that as a youngster, you know, that would be such an incredibly inspiring experience. So if we could, there's a lot we can learn, I think. I mean, Ekiden road relay racing is not going to suddenly take off in the UK. We don't have that history. But I mean, the road relays that happen in the UK, they're really popular. And, you know, like the men's 12 stage, that's such an epic event, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, you know, yeah, so there's a lot we can learn from them, I think.
So you married in 2002, I think, wasn't it, Mara?
Yes.
And then you returned to the UK that same year. That's when you started to take your running sort of more seriously again? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So my posting with the embassy in Japan came to an end at the end of 2002, and I moved back to the UK then. And I was 29 then. So I thought, right, this dream that I have to be to be a top athlete, it's kind of now or never. Because I'll be too old. So I switched my work to part-time, and I started training seriously. I was trying to qualify for the Athens Olympics in the marathon, but I didn't make it. But I felt I knew I could do better than that first marathon I did in 2004. So I continued trying. And I made it to the 2005 Helsinki World Championships marathon, where we won the team bronze medal there. And then, I was improving my PB at the marathon. I was really specialising in the marathon from that point, although I did still run cross country, half marathons, 10,000 on the track, so on.
Yeah, getting back to your PBs, I mean, I'm just going to call out some of them, like your 5K is 15:28.
Yeah.
Your 10K is 31:49 on the track, and I think it's 31:43 in the roads.
Yeah.
You ran 54:13, 10 miles, 68:29 half marathon, and then you ran 2:23:12. So as you went on and you kept learning your trade, and you obviously gone part-time, you kept improving. You just got better as you seemed to go on. I think your PB was it 35 or 36 you were at the time in 2009?
Yes, so, that's right.
During that period, did you stay in Britain, or did you go back to Japan for periods, or did you go to places like St. Moritz or Flagstaff, or what? Or did you go to somewhere different that you said, right, this is what I need to do for me to make it to this level, what I feel I can achieve? Like, I mean, you were 6th in the Olympic Games. I mean, a fantastic achievement. So from making that decision at 29, what did you do to say, right, I'm going to make this happen?
So it was a whole number of things. So one was switching my work to part-time. So I had more time to train, to rest, to have physio, to do strength and conditioning, all that stuff. I did a lot of work on my diet. So I started eating a lot more variety, a lot more Japanese foods like seaweeds and shellfish, basically just really highly nutritious foods. I started doing more strength and conditioning. I started doing more kind of what I call self-care, like massage, visiting the physio, etc. And I increased my training. So I was doing higher mileage, more intense sessions, bigger sessions. And I think I was mentally much more mature at that stage than I was when I was, say, training with Bob's group. When I was younger, I had no interest in the marathon. I just thought it was way too far. But as I got older, well, I knew I didn't really have the speed for the 5K and the 10K. So it was slightly by a process of elimination that I ended up focusing on the marathon. But because I was a bit older and more able to cope with training and work and everything, I think I was just more able to absorb the training required. And then I started doing altitude training. So the first altitude trip I did was in 2005 to the Pyrenees. And then thereafter, I went many times. I went to San Moritz, Albuquerque in New Mexico, Mammoth Lakes in California once. And then I went to several altitude places in Japan at different times. So that was, I mean, altitude training is widely regarded as being beneficial for endurance runners. So that's why I initially did it. And then thereafter, it was quite focused on competition. So before a big competition, I would go for between 4 weeks and 3 months, say. I also went to Flagstaff. But it's a little bit hit and miss with altitude. You know, sometimes you can overdo things and end up a bit overtrained. Yeah. And then I moved back to Japan in 2006. And at that point, I was a full-time athlete, so I'd taken leave from my work. And so because I was full-time, I could focus totally on running. So, you know, every run had purpose. I tried to do it as kind of well as I could, but I also had lots more time for rest. I had a really good massage therapist there who I went to probably twice a week. And then the competition there is absolutely world class. So the women's marathons, the top kind of elite marathons, there were 3 for women and 3 for men. There's been a lot of change since then, and actually most, if not all of them, have been discontinued, sadly. But when I was there, the Osaka Marathon, I did once as a sort of training run, and then I won it in 2008. I did the Yokohama Marathon in 2011. And then races like the Marugame Half Marathon, the Ome 30K, which is a really long-standing race, Matsue Half. So lots of really top competition, and that just lifts your game because you know the competition is going to be good. You can learn from what you see around you. So now, I mean, the currently competing women in the UK, when I'm in touch with them, I really encourage them to go to Japan and race because it's a real eye-opener, and it's so professional. Everything there is done so professionally. And I really learned a huge amount by training there. I was never part of a corporate team, but just being there and competing in races, you meet people, you hear stuff, you see how people train. So it was a really, really valuable learning experience being there.
Who was overseeing your training then, Mara? Were you doing that a lot on your own, or did you take a lot of the principles that you learned under Bob Parker into your latter training as well?
Yeah, it was a bit of a mixture. I mean, between 2003 and 2006, I trained a lot with a group at Kingsmeadow Track in Kingston, which was overseen by Alan Story. So I learned a lot from him. I was focusing on the marathon then, so I learned a lot from what the Japanese athletes were doing, just reading about what was, what previous marathon champions did. To be honest, training for the marathon, personally, I don't think is difficult or complicated at all. Learning what to do, you know, it's not rocket science. It's fairly straightforward. Doing it is difficult, but learning what to do, you know, it's been done thousands of times before. You know, you just need to read a few books, look on the internet, you know, look at people like what people like Steve Jones were doing. You know, during the 1980s, the British men, people like Mike Grattan, Charlie Spedding, Steve Jones, you know, were running world-class times and, you know, winning major races. You know, there's a lot of information out there which is relatively accessible. It's not that difficult to figure out what you have to do, but it's tough doing it. And, you know, you get injuries, you have to have enough time to rest. And if you're really specializing in the marathon, then the training probably will be a little bit different to if you're specializing in cross country 10K, because the marathon is a much more aerobic event. But actually, coming back to the PBs that you were talking about earlier, John, I broke all my PBs for the shorter distances after I specialized in the marathon. Received wisdom is that once you go to the marathon, you lose your speed.
I was going to ask you that question.
Yeah.
And you just answered it. I swear to God, I've been written down. I was going to ask you this question, and you've just answered it. Because, like, I mean, we won't go there with your 1,500 PB that's down in power 10 and so on. But I was looking at it and I thought, my God, she's after running her PBs after she went to the marathon. They've actually improved.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, even after I specialized in the marathon, I still did some training for the shorter events, and I still competed in the shorter events now and again. But I think after I switched to the marathon, my whole training load just took a step up, and I just made a big improvement overall. So I think that's why my PBs over the shorter distances also improved. So I think the shorter distance PBs improved, not just because I was specializing in the marathon, but because I was doing everything much more professionally, training, self-care, physio, injury prevention, all that, nutrition, all that stuff. So a lot of people think that once you do the marathon, that's it for your PB, the shorter distances, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Of course, it depends on your age as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I look at a lot of what Steve Monaghetti did, and he was always training for a marathon, but he was always running good 5Ks and good 10Ks at Zatopek meets and the meets in Australia and so on. A couple of questions I want to ask. The first one is, you said some of the events have gone by the wayside in Japan, and I was actually watching the men's 10,000 meter trials the other morning, and I was looking at all the people who were in the race, and virtually what I found incredulous is it's the land of Asics, it's the land of Mizuno, and yet everybody was wearing a Nike vest in the trials. Yeah. Everybody was wearing a Nike vest. Is it partially to do with kind of Western influence that some of these races have gone by the wayside? Is that mindset changed a little bit there that's affected it? And the second question, because I don't want to forget it, is switching away completely different from that, will be what do you think of where British distance running is at the moment? Or if you could answer that first part first, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, so I moved back to the UK in 2011, so I'm a little bit out of touch with the detail of the Japanese running scene at the minute. But as I understand it, the discontinuation of some of those events is for a number of reasons. Things like, the cooperation of the police is obviously needed. TV and sponsorship, the growth of the mass marathon market. So some of the events have been kind of rolled into a mass event. Yeah. Obviously, a mass event generates huge revenue if you've got, let's say, 30,000 recreational runners competing. The Yokohama Marathon, I think that was discontinued related to the Yokohama Ekiden, I think. Mm. I'm a little bit on shaky ground here. I strongly recommend the Japan Running News blog, which is run by Brett Lana.
Yeah, this Canadian.
he has an encyclopedic knowledge of the Japanese running scene, and he would know the detail of why each particular race was discontinued. But I mean, the most recent to be discontinued is the Fukuoka men's marathon, which is such a historic, iconic race, you know, and before the World Championships started, it was kind of the World Championships for men. Yeah. So that's really sad that that's going. But I mean, there are new races coming up, and, you know, I'm sure they'll be really well supported. So I hope that the elite, the elite marathon running world in Japan won't be diluted by these changes. And then your next question was about where we are in the UK with, did you mean distance running in general?
Distance running, I mean, like with a lot of things that have been put forward, like, I mean, I don't know if you want to get into things like run equal, zero tolerance, you know, I see a lot of the stuff being watered down. The UK into counties looks like the track and field will be gone, the cross country will be gone. So I just wanted to see what your take and what you're looking at. Like, there's probably pluses and there's minuses, but just wanted to see what your take on it was.
Yeah. I mean, this could take us several hours.
Well, it could, but
yeah. I mean, I've never worked for UK Athletics. I have just been, I have just joined the England Athletics London Regional Council as a co-opted member. So I'm hoping to get a bit more involved in the sort of administration side. But I don't know. I mean, we obviously have some top athletes, and, you know, some are obviously really thriving. And whether that's their coach or their club or the group that they're in, you know, it'll vary from one person to the next. I think in the marathon, I mean, we have some really top athletes. There isn't a great amount of depth there, but, you know, training full time for the marathon at elite level is really hard. You need a lot of support. And because we don't have an organized structure here, like they do in Japan, for example, I mean, like Steve Vernon's group, that's a well-established, organized group, as I understand it, but there aren't a lot of those groups around. So until we have a system like that, it's difficult for me to see how we can generate a lot of depth in the marathon at world-class level. And I'm not for a moment criticizing the currently competing athletes. Yeah. Yeah. I know all of them will be doing their absolute best, but you need a lot of support to train at that level. With cross country, I mean, my views were very clear on the equal distances debate. I think we don't need equal distances. I think women's cross country is great as it is. You know, I competed through over shorter distances than the men. Not once in my life did I think I or the women's event was weak or inferior compared to the men. I just went there and did my best. Not once did anyone say to me, the women's event is inferior. You know, why don't you demand you race longer? Yeah. You know, I just went there and did my best. But I mean, the key for me on that particular topic is it would be a massive decision for the sport if equal distances were brought in or imposed. And you can't make a massive decision like that just because one small part of the sport is demanding it. You have to, you know, do plenty of consultation. They've done a consultation. I mean, there were concerns about how open it was, because the introduction kind of led people to believe that a decision had been made. The questions were quite leading. So you have to have consultation. I think you have to do impact assessments. So, you know, if equal distances were brought in, what would the impact be on participation of women? What would it be on under 20 women, under 17 women? You know, what would the impact be on the competition calendar, on coaching? So you can't just sort of suddenly bring in a massive change without thinking through very carefully what the consequences would be. Yeah. I think that's what I think we're in a bit of a similar situation with the carbon plate shoes, because they've had an enormous impact on the sport, not just in terms of times people are running, but, you know, now with coaching, for example, if you want to produce an athlete at world level, you have to have an athlete who responds well to the shoes.
Yeah, but even on that, sorry for interrupting, but even on that, you could be with a coach for, let's say, 6, 7, 8, 9 years and could be doing all the right things, and they're trying to find these little gains, and he might be improving 2 or 3 seconds over 1500, and it could be 4 or 5 seconds over 3K. And then that athlete doesn't feel happy, and they go to somebody else, they buy the new pair of shoes, and all of a sudden they run a 20-second PB over 5K. Yeah. And that coach that has been doing work for is made feel undervalued, I feel. There is inside the things to it which nobody's really thought about. It's here, and there's not a lot we can do about it, but I do admit at times it does leave a sour taste in my mouth, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's a topic which attracts strong views on both sides. Personally, I would like to see a much lower stack height limit imposed, but I don't think that's going to happen. So, I can't really see the sport going back. But I think there's no question that it has massively changed the sport and different aspects of it.
Well, there's just some things we won't know where we're at, and that can go to each brand. Like, I've known parents who've gone, oh, you're old-fashioned, this is happening, you've got to embrace technology, and that's fine because their daughter or the son is after running this great PB or is after running well. But I think what could come back and could bite them in the backside is in 2 years' time, there could be a rival that goes into a new shoe or a new spike that person who, let's say, could be in a pair of Nikes, and they're the shoe that they've improved on. But somebody else could get an Asics or an Adidas, and all of a sudden, over 3,000 meters, their rival could be 10 seconds ahead, and they're going to be shaking their heads and they're going to be giving out. Because you've opened Pandora's box, you're going to have to suck the lemon of what you get out of it. And that's where there could be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, these are what you just said is an example of the consequences of the new shoe rules. So, and the performance advantage they give on average is something like 4%, but there's a lot of variation from kind of 0 to, well, we don't really know, but could be 8%, 10%, and that's 10% improvement is way bigger than the tiny differences between athletes at elite level.
Yeah.
So, I'm not really coaching any elite athletes, but if I was, I would be thinking, okay, I'm just going to park my training program for a moment. I need to educate myself and find the shoe, whatever brand it is, that my athlete responds the best in, make sure they're in that shoe, because 10% is, or 8%.
It's massive. It's off the chart.
Massive. That's going to determine the results of races more than the best training program any coach can make an athlete do. So these consequences are starting to be played out, and there are views on both sides. But I think it's definitely, running is now a technology sport in my view. It was pretty much a human endeavour sport. I mean, for me, it was really the last of the human endeavour only sports. I mean, obviously, it's not 100% human endeavour because previously athletes wore shoes. Most athletes wore shoes. But now, races are determined not let's say 99% by human endeavour, but maybe 90% by human endeavour and 10% by technology.
Yeah.
And that's a totally different type of event for me.
Agreed.
Running has become a sport like cycling, golf, fencing, rowing, where the technology has a huge impact on the outcome of a competition.
Yeah.
So Mara, if you were given carte blanche and you could change UK athletics, what and you're starting tomorrow, what would be the first thing that you'd implement, that you'd try and change?
Blimey. That you've put me on the spot there. I mean, for me, I think the cross country equalisation debate and some of the selection of the marathon team, the selection of Steph Twell over Charlotte Purdue in the women's marathon team, I think they've demonstrated the importance of very good, clear communication, transparency, bringing this, getting buy-in from the sport, working with the sport. These are not complicated things. I think there's quite a lot of mistrust of the governing body from within the sport, and I don't really know what the cause of that is. It could be going back a long time, and I think Jo Coates recognises that, and I think she's genuinely tried to take measures to build better trust and respect of the governing body from within the sport. But I think things like the cross-country debate didn't really help that. So, for example, the survey, I, and looking from social media, lots of other people understood that UK had already made a decision to equalise distances. Then the questions were a bit leading. Sort of ambiguous communication just creates unnecessary sort of anxiety and mistrust in the sport. So I think absolutely clear communication, engagement, genuine, transparent engagement with the sport. Everybody in the sport, I think, would want a governing body to be really good and functioning really well and have the trust and respect of people within the sport. We all want the sport to function well. So, and I mean, to be fair on UK, it's a difficult task. I think running athletics is a bit like herding cats, because the different disciplines within athletics are actually very different. So, for example, hammer throw is completely different to the marathon, is completely different to the 4x4 relay. We're a very kind of disparate sport. And then you've got cross country, the race walking, mountain trail. It's a very, very disparate sport. So I think UK, have a difficult job. And Jo Coates, she's relatively new in the job. She's got a difficult job. But I think things like this, the selection and cross country haven't really helped to build the trust from the sport in the governing body. And I mean, things like transparency about why decisions are made would help. Christian Malcolm also is relatively new as the head coach. The performance director, Sarah Symington, the same. So, they're a new team. I think we have to give them a chance to prove themselves. And I don't envy them. I think they've got a difficult task. But to answer your question, Mark, I think building that trust is really important. And for me, that means very clear communication, being transparent, really engaging the sport. I mean, I know Jo and others have done a lot of Zoom sort of webinars to try and engage people in the sport, and that's all fantastic. Yeah. Again, this is a topic that we could spend hours on.
Oh, without a doubt, because look, we've all got views, opinions. It's not easy. It's like even coming back to the shoe debate there. I mean, you can't blame anybody for going down this route with this technology if it's going to be there. If we were running today, and I was running today and racing today, there's no choice, but you'd have to wear them. You'd be silly if you didn't, to be quite honest with you, because you're not going to be on an equal footing. And therein lies the answer for me, that if you didn't wear them, you're not going to be competitive. So, this is not blaming anybody. It's just, in terms of people that use them, it's just that I think it could have been, again, by World Athletics, it should have been more open. They're thinking of doing this, because the shoe technology for me in the past, shoes have always advanced and stuff. But shoes for me in the past were always about negating injury. They were trying to be injury prevention, the latest technology, so you didn't get injured. It wasn't about for bouncing down the road and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think the current athletes, and any athlete aspiring to elite level now, has to be in these shoes. You'd be foolish not to. You don't want to be 3 minutes down the road in the women's marathon. You have to be in the shoes. So we can't blame individual athletes, and I don't think anybody is. I mean, Tim Hutchins.
I think some people take it personally that way.
Yeah,
I think they're missing our bigger picture of what we're trying to go on about. And they might not agree with that picture, and that's fine. I mean, they've got their point of view, they've got their angle. Totally accept that.
Yeah,
that's their point of view. But I don't necessarily have to agree with it, like they don't have to agree with mine.
Yeah, I mean, you can't blame individual athletes now for wearing the shoes. They have to be competitive. it's more a systemic level. And I mean, World Athletics set the rules, so it's up to them to preserve the integrity of competition. But even for them, you know, I suspect what's behind this is that the shoe manufacturers fund the sport, essentially. So, you know, maybe World Athletics didn't really have the power to impose a more strict. I don't know. I don't work for World Athletics. I haven't been involved.
Yeah, no. But when I look at the Japanese 10,000 meter trials, and virtually everybody's wearing Nike, that for me says a massive big statement, right? Because obviously the home of Asics or Asics, the home of Mizuno, and not one athlete wearing any of those, or Pearl Izumi, nothing. And all of a sudden you've got Nike every vest virtually. So that's where I am with that. Last question I'm going to ask you is this. You know, we're hoping a lot more younger females are going to be watching this and so on. You've gone on about your training, diet, and so on. Any advice to an up and coming Mara Yamauchi that's quite young? Would you kind of give him a bit of Julian Gorter advice? And I have to give Julian 10 out of 10 for that bit of advice. I'll be giving him a bell after this. What advice would you give? I know you've said it and stuff, but in just a short, concise way, what advice would you give to any upcoming 17, 18, 19-year-old that wants to try and go for the sport?
I would say just do your absolute best on the things which will make you go fast, which are training, nutrition, self-care, looking after yourself, injury prevention, you know, practicing tactics in races, that sort of thing. Those are the things which will make you run fast. My other piece of advice is try to stay off social media and try to not take too much to heart what other people say. I think criticism of young people generally, and especially young athletes, achieves nothing positive. And I think they can take it really to heart, especially young women. So 17, 18, 19-year-old women, I would say just try and stay away from that stuff. It's not going to make you run fast. All it's going to do is sap your confidence and make you feel bad about yourself. So, I mean, people of that age, they're never going to leave social media. That's the world we're in now. But just try to limit, you know, how much time you spend on it, whose views you look at. There are a lot of idiots out there on social media.
You said that
about me.
Yeah, so just, I mean, the things which will make you go fast, like that I just mentioned, you know, those are the things to focus on. And it's tough. You'll need support, but just try and stick at it. I mean, if you look at me, I've had a really on-off running career. You know, from age 11 to when I went to the Olympics, it was 24 years. You don't have to be on top form all the time. You can have fallow years. You can go off and do something else, return to the sport. So, you know, don't feel you have to sort of be perfect and going well all the time. There will be down times, but as much as you can, just keep at it, stick with it. And, you know, until you're sort of 35, 40, you know, that's a long time to have bites at the cherry, as it were. Yeah. That's
the best bit of advice I've ever heard. Seriously, it's really, and all the stuff there has just been really good in the downtime. And because everybody wants it now, they want, and they kind of put a pressure on themselves. Really good bit of advice.
Great stuff. Well, we always finish these podcasts up with sort of 5 random sort of questions that we ask everyone. So I'm going to hit you with the first one. All right. So you've just run a marathon. What's the first thing you eat and the first thing you drink?
So I always used to have a protein carb recovery drink as soon as possible after the finish. But that was quite difficult because I never had any appetite and getting it down was quite tough. So don't worry if you feel like you can't drink or eat anything. If that's the situation, then just water, something. Water is better than nothing. And if you're going to go for alcohol, then try and get some sort of non-alcoholic drinks and food into you first.
Absolutely, yeah. Right, you can listen to one song to get you in the zone before a race. What do you listen to?
Gold by Spandau Ballet.
Oh, that's a good one. That's got John's approval, I can see.
Yeah. Nice Spandau Ballet.
What are your favourite trainers to wear now, and what were they before as well?
So I was sponsored by ASICS throughout my career, and I still have a sort of informal relationship with them. So my favourite shoe, my favourite trainer all along has been the GT 2000 series, which have changed over the years, but I still use them now. And the gel Tarther was the racer that I used most. I had shoes made for me, but they were essentially gel Tarthers in my size. I haven't worn racing shoes for quite a while now because I've had a foot injury, but yeah, those were the two main shoes that I loved and used a lot. Of course, I was competing in the pre-carbon plate era, so I haven't worn the carbon plate shoes. I mean, I'm 47 now and I'm retired. I'm a recreational runner. So it's, you know, for me to kind of pretend that I'm fast and put on a pair of carbon plate shoes it just seems a bit silly somehow.
I'm sure that's not true. You'll have to give it a go, I'm sure.
Yeah, maybe. I want to feel what it's like to sort of bounce along the road. And I've been intending to do that, but because I've had this sort of on-off foot injury for quite a long time. It's better now, but I had it for about 18 months. I've been a bit paranoid about my footwear, and I just thought I'm just not going to do that until my foot's completely better.
Very wise, yeah. Right, the next one you've got is you've hit the wall in a race and you're completely depleted and you're just about to quit. You can see one person on the side of the road or the track to get you through this tough spell. Who do you see and why?
Gosh, I mean, to be honest, in races, I was so focused that I rarely saw or heard what was going on at the side of the road. I mean, people would say to me, I shouted at you at mile 17 or whatever, and I have no recollection of it whatsoever. So I think what I tended to do more than kind of feel the support of the crowd was I would set myself little goals. So I would say, right, get to the next lamppost, get to the next mile marker, get to the next drink station. So that was more my way of getting through those really tough hit the wall moments in the marathon. Nice. Yeah, I think also in the marathon, I sometimes went through bad patches and then sort of rallied a bit. So, I mean, if you really are out of carbohydrate, then you're probably not going to rally and feel better. But I would say just try and keep going through bad patches, because sometimes you do kind of pick up and feel okay again.
Absolutely. Right, this is a really silly one, I warn you now. What is your favourite cheese?
What's my favourite cheese? Yeah. Ooh, well, I used to train in St. Moritz in Switzerland. So let's say a Swiss cheese, Gruyere or Emmental.
Oh,
I mean, I don't eat them often, but they're pretty special when I do eat them.
Lovely. That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Mara, thank you ever so much for your time today. I know myself and John really, really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Mara, thank you very much. Doma arigato gozaimasu.
Iie, do itashimashite. Arigato gozaimasu.
Thanks.
Right, sayonara.
Sayonara.
Right, John, what's your training tip of the week this week?
I don't know if I've done this before, because it's hard to remember a lot of the times if I have said the same thing, but it's going to come down to tapering and stuff like that. And it was something I tried to mimic every time something worked. I always tried to keep it the same. And you find an awful lot of club athletes or people that are new to running, they just try to do different things the whole time. And it's very hard if they know they're going to improve or not improve, and they don't know why they have or why they haven't. So if you've done something and you continually try to rehearse it and it's not working, well, then you have to change it. But if it's working, keep it the same, because if you're performing well off that taper, it could be like normally you might do 20 by 400 on a Tuesday, and all of a sudden you do 8 and you're just a little bit fresher and you don't go as hard in the session and you run into race the weekend, you perform. Keep it the same.
Let's have hijinks with John. What we got for us this week? It's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm laughing before I even start. Basically, a few years ago, I got this guy rang me up and he wanted me to help coach him. And he wanted to, go through that. He wasn't running very, very well. So we decided to meet at my place. And he gave me his training schedules and we talked about the running and what he'd been doing. And I felt where he'd been going wrong. But I needed his training schedules to see where he was at. And anyway, he brought them with him, and about 2 years training schedules and everything. And they were actually very, very detailed. And that was fine. He left. And I said I'd peruse over these over the next couple of days. But as I started going through them, like I could see the runs in the morning, the run in the evening, the paces, the workouts, a whole lot. But then he had two other things in there. And one was plyometrics, 20 minutes. But then he had sex in there. So 20 minutes sex, 25 minutes sex, 30 minutes sex, 15 minutes sex, 20 minutes. And this was every day. And I was looking at this guy. I was like, Jesus Christ. This guy obviously thinks this is part of training, and I was actually nearly starting to be a little bit jealous because this guy was getting a great innings. And I was like, what is it? Like, it's every day. And I was going through it and there was never a day missed. Even when he took a break from running, he never missed 6. So, obviously we made up a week later and I wanted to go through the training and everything like that. And I said, Kim, I said, look, I have a bit of an awkward question to ask you. I said, why have you put down that you're doing 20 minutes sex, 25 minutes sex, 30 minutes sex and all that? He says, that's not sex. I said, but you've sex down. He says, oh yeah, but he says, abbreviated. He says, it's stretching exercises. You can imagine how big I felt. So that's when sex isn't sex.
Oh, that is a cracking story, John. Great stuff. John, thank you very much for your time this week, mate. I really appreciate it.
Cheers, mate. All the best.